The clinking of wine glasses, the gentle hum of conversation, and the occasional burst of laughter filled the dining room. Like it always did during these orchestrated family performances, candlelight danced across the crystal chandelier, casting soft shadows on the long oak table polished to perfection. Every seat was filled. Friends from church neighbors, cousins who only showed up for events with cake, all gathered to celebrate Gerald and Margaret Whitmore's 50th wedding anniversary. I sat at the far end of the table, not quite in the center of the picture, but not completely out of it either. I had chosen my seat, or maybe the seat had chosen me, the one where I could be present yet still invisible. It was the same seat I always seemed to end up in. My brother Nick sat beside our parents, his voice loud and confident as he retold the same stories he always did. In his versions, he was always the hero, the savior at the office, the charming son, the dependable one. Mom laughed at every punchline like it was the first time she'd heard it. Dad sipped his wine and offered him the kind of nods reserved for pride. Neither of them looked my way. I had arrived early, even brought a gift, a family photo I'd spent weeks restoring. It had taken hours of digital work and careful color correction to bring the faded edges back to life. I had framed it in polished walnut and wrapped it in gold ribbon. I handed it to Mom when I arrived, and she smiled, said, "Thank you," then placed it beside the centerpiece. Unopened, forgotten. A decoration, not a gesture I wore. A new dress, dark green with structured shoulders, something that felt less soft, less apologetic. I had rehearsed this moment in my head, the dinner, where maybe something would shift. Maybe I'd belong. But as the courses passed and the wine kept flowing, the silence around me thickened. I tried to speak once, maybe twice, but my words evaporated before they reached the center of the table. I smiled when I was supposed to, nodded when I was expected to, tried to earn a glance, a question, a crumb of attention. None came. Then, just as dessert was being served, little slices of lemon tart topped with sugared berries, my father set his fork down and, without looking at me, said in a voice loud enough to carry, "Don't pretend you matter to us." The words landed like a slap, sharp and echoing. A pause settled across the table. Knives froze mid-slice. Someone coughed awkwardly. The room wasn't silent, not yet, but something in it had shifted like air, leaving a balloon. Then Nick, with his signature smirk, leaned back in his chair and added, "Honestly, we forget you exist half the time." A few people chuckled. Not cruelly, more like they didn't want to be the only ones not laughing. No one said my name. No one objected. No one reached for my hand or asked if I was okay. I stared at my plate. The lemon tart blurred as my vision sharpened inward, focusing on the tight coil forming in my chest. I didn't cry. Not this time. The tears had dried up years ago. I had come prepared for rejection, just not for its public performance. Instead, I reached for my water glass, tapped its rim gently with the handle of my fork. The clink was small but deliberate. The room hushed. Even Nick stopped mid-sip. "I won't take much of your time," I said, rising slowly. My legs were steady, my voice even. Just 3 sentences. Every eye turned to me. Dad looked up finally. His expression unreadable, somewhere between annoyance and expectation. Mom shifted in her seat, her smile faltering. The aunt across from me blinked like she was trying to place me. Cousin Elise looked down at her lap. I inhaled once, then let the words come. They were already there. Waiting. "I have loved this family with every part of me you decided wasn't enough." A few heads turned, a fork dropped. My cousin's husband cleared his throat, then looked away. I scanned their faces. The people I'd grown up with, shared birthdays with, stood beside at funerals. None of them looked surprised. That stung more than the words. I waited a beat, then gave them the second sentence. "After tonight, you'll never have to pretend I exist again." Nick shifted uncomfortably. Mom opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Dad leaned back, arms crossed, watching like he was waiting for a punchline. There wasn't one. I placed my glass down with care, as if to leave no mess behind, turned and walked toward the hallway. My heels clicked softly against the wood floor, echoing in the silence behind me. No one followed, not yet, and I didn't look back. The air outside hit harder than I expected. Sharp, almost metallic against my skin. I didn't have a coat on. I hadn't planned to leave that early, but after what had just unfolded inside, staying felt like dragging my own body back into a fire I had already crawled out of once. The gravel under my shoes crunched with every step, each stone pressing back like tiny bones protesting beneath me. It was the same driveway I used to run down as a little girl. Barefoot knees, scraped hair, wild chasing after Nick. Even when he never looked back, I used to believe that if I ran fast enough, I'd catch him. That maybe he'd slow down and wait. He never did tonight. The path felt longer, colder, or maybe it was me no longer sprinting towards someone, just walking away from what I had finally accepted would never be mine. The memories rose uninvited, like bruises blooming under skin, one after the other, clear as frost on a window pane. I was 10, standing by the living room window on Father's Day, holding a card I had made myself, hand-drawn fishing rods, and a crooked little boat because that one time, years before he'd taken me out on the lake, I had spent hours coloring it and practicing what I'd say when I gave it to him. But he never came home. When I asked where he'd been, he said, "Work comes first. You'll understand when you're older." I did grow up, and I still don't understand. At 12, I had a birthday that was supposed to be simple this year, as Mom put it. She baked a small cake that leaned to one side and gave me a paperback book from the sale bin. The year before, Nick had gotten a surprise Party Balloons pizza. 20 kids and a new mountain bike. I asked her once why mine was different. She smiled, tight and tired, and said, "Nick's more social, sweetie. It's not the same." At 17, I graduated high school in a cap and gown I bought with my part-time job money. I walked across the stage, heart-pounding, eyes scanning the crowd. They weren't there. Afterward, I checked my phone. One message from Mom. "Sorry, couldn't get out of work. You understand, right?" That line again. You understand. Like understanding was something I owed them. Like I was supposed to be the easy child, the one who didn't need too much, who filled the space with silence and called it grace. There were vacations. I wasn't invited to family dinners. I wasn't told about Christmas cards, where my name was spelled wrong if it was written at all. And still I showed up, I stayed, I tried. Tried to be more agreeable, less sensitive, more helpful, less noticeable. I twisted myself in knots, trying to shrink into the kind of daughter they could love, hoping that maybe if I just became easier to swallow, they'd stop spitting me out. But no matter how small I made myself, I never fit. I was always too much or not enough. Loud in the wrong ways, quiet in the wrong moments, and yet I kept coming back, like a moth to the same porch light that never warmed me. I brought gifts I cooked. I remembered birthdays they forgot. I offered help that was accepted without acknowledgement. I became fluent in the language of being overlooked until tonight, until those words from my father landed like a stamp on my forehead. You don't matter. Until Nick laughed and no one objected. Until I realized the script had been written long ago and I had been cast in a role I never agreed to. The invisible one. The filler. The extra. The wind picked up and tangled itself in my hair. I pulled it away from my face and looked back at the house just once. Through the window, I could still see them. Laughter had resumed. Someone refilled a glass. My empty chair remained untouched. No one had moved it. No one had filled the space. That was always the truth, wasn't it? I didn't leave a hole when I was gone. I left quiet. I stepped down from the porch. My heels sank slightly into the gravel before I reached the pavement. As I reached the edge of the driveway, I paused under the old street lamp. Its yellow glow stretched my shadow across the asphalt. Like a long, thin ribbon, I stood there for a breath. One single inhale that tasted like winter and endings. The front door opened behind me. I turned slightly, not fully, just enough to catch it in my peripheral. Mom stood in the doorway, still holding her wine glass, like she'd forgotten it was in her hand. Her eyes scanned the night until they landed on me. We stared at each other across the distance. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear what she said. Maybe she whispered my name. Maybe it was just a sigh. She didn't step forward. I didn't give her a second chance to. I turned toward the car, opened the door, and sat down behind the wheel. For a moment, I just sat there, hands still, engine off the world, holding its breath around me. Then I lowered the window halfway and leaned slightly out. Not dramatic, not tearful, just steady. My voice didn't shake. Take care because you'll never get another chance to take care of me. I rolled the window back up, shifted the gear into drive, and pulled away without looking back. No horns, no slam doors, no shouting from the porch, just the sound of gravel under tires and the steady hum of a heart finally letting go. My apartment smelled like cinnamon when I stepped inside. It always did this time of year, especially with the bakery just downstairs. The scent clung to the walls like memory, warm, familiar, forgiving. I slipped off my shoes, dropped my purse on the kitchen counter, and let my back rest against the door until it clicked shut behind me. The sound echoed softly in the quiet space, but it didn't feel empty. It felt still, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't want to fill that stillness with noise. I didn't cry. I thought I might. I had half expected to collapse the moment I was alone, to fall apart on the floor, overwhelmed by what had just happened. But nothing cracked open. No tidal wave of grief rushed in. Only silence, not the kind that punishes, not the kind that weighs. This was something else entirely. A silence that wrapped around me like a quilt, one that said, "You can rest now." I poured a glass of water and stood by the window. Outside, Ashbridge was winding down for the night. The streetlights cast golden pools on the pavement. The bakery sign below flickered once, then went dark. Across the street, someone dragged their recycling bin to the curb. Ordinary things, soft things. Life continuing. I walked over to my desk, tugged my journal from the drawer, and opened it to a fresh page. The first line came without hesitation. I don't owe anyone my silence ever again. I underlined it twice, then set the pen down. The next morning, I woke early, made coffee slowly, and didn't check my phone. I sat by the window again, watching the street come alive. A kid in a too-big backpack ran to catch the school bus. A man in a scarf stopped to help an older woman with her grocery bags. People were kind to strangers. It made me wonder why it had been so hard for my own family to do the same for me. My phone buzzed around noon. I stared at it on the counter screen, lighting up with a number I knew too well. Mom. I let it ring. Then again, and again. I didn't answer. There were no voicemails, no texts, just silence. The same silence I'd received for years. Only now I chose it too. 2 days later, another call came. This time it was Nick. I stared at his name thumb, hovering over the screen. I almost let it ring out, but I answered. Not out of obligation. Just curiosity, Claire, he said. No greeting, no fake cheer. Just my name, raw and unpolished. I didn't respond. He sighed. We were talking about you the other night. Mom's been crying a lot. She's not herself. I stayed quiet, letting him sit in the discomfort. The same discomfort I had carried for decades. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I'm sorry. He said I didn't realize how much we were hurting you. I thought you were just dramatic. That word, dramatic, the label slapped on every tear, every plea, every truth I had dared to speak. I didn't flinch. I just let it float between us like a ghost finally named. I'm glad you're realizing it now, I said softly. A pause. Does that mean are you coming back? I looked around my little apartment, the bookshelf with titles I'd picked just for me. The yellow curtains I'd bought on impulse that made the room feel like morning, even on gray days. The mismatched mugs that I loved, because no one else had touched them before me. No, I said, I'm not angry, but I'm not that girl anymore either. Another silence. He didn't try again. After the call ended, I didn't feel shaken. I didn't feel triumphant either. Just steady, like the ground had finally stopped shifting beneath me. That week I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center. It had been years since I picked up a brush. I wasn't good. My lines were shaky. My colors bled together in ways I didn't intend, but it didn't matter. I wasn't painting for anyone else. I wasn't trying to be excellent. I was just letting myself create something that didn't need to be understood. At home, I began changing things slowly. I took down the framed photo of my childhood home, not out of anger, but because it never really felt like mine. I replaced it with a foggy lake in Maine I'd photographed on a solo trip the year before. I added a crooked shelf I built myself. It leaned slightly to the left, but it held everything I loved. A thrifted rug that didn't match anything but made me smile. A string of warm fairy lights above my bed. A clay bowl from a pottery class where I'd made a complete mess and kept it anyway. Each item in my space became a sentence in a story that was mine alone, not inherited, not approved, not passed down, just chosen. As December neared, I decided to host my own holiday dinner. It wasn't elaborate, no centerpieces, no perfectly glazed ham, just a few friends I had made through work, my art class, the flower vendor at the Saturday market, people who had shown me kindness without history. We sat around my little table candles, flickering music, playing low, passing dishes we'd each made. There was laughter. Real laughter. Not the kind that covers up tension, but the kind that rises from comfort. At one point, someone raised a glass and said to chosen families. And something inside me, something small and quiet and aching, finally loosened its grip. No one asked where my parents were. No one mentioned Nick. And I didn't bring it up, I didn't need to. There were no ghosts at that table, only warmth. When the night ended and the dishes were stacked in the sink, I stood barefoot in the kitchen sipping tea lights. Dimmed to a soft glow, I felt full not from food, but from something deeper. Like I had come home to myself. I walked over to my desk, opened my journal again, and wrote one more sentence beneath the first. Healing doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like stillness. Then I closed the book and sat quietly letting that stillness hold me. It arrived on a Thursday, a plain white envelope tucked between utility bills and a flyer for a new pizza place. No return address, but the handwriting stopped me cold. Neat, deliberate, with a slight curve on every ER, my mother's. I stood at the kitchen counter staring at it for a long time. The late afternoon sun cast a soft shadow across the paper, and for a second I considered tossing it unopened. But something in me, curiosity maybe, or closure, made me slide my finger under the seal. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. Folded carefully into thirds, the ink was slightly smudged in places. I unfolded it slowly. Claire, I'm not writing to ask for anything. I know I've already asked for too much in my silence. Lately things echo. Things I used to think were small birthdays. I brushed off. Moments. I dismissed. Words. I said or didn't say that. I can't stop hearing now. You were always quiet and I let that make you invisible. That's on me, I should have spoken up more. I should have loved you better, I was afraid of disrupting things. But I see now what I allowed by keeping peace in the wrong places. Your father's words that night. They weren't just his, they were ours. I didn't stop him, I didn't stop Nick. I didn't stop anything, I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I see it now. Love, Mom, I read it twice. Then once more, slower. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic promises, just words quiet and aching. An acknowledgement I never thought would come. A door left ajar, I folded the letter carefully and placed it back into the envelope. Then I walked to my dresser and opened the bottom drawer, the one where I kept old journals and photographs. I hadn't yet decided what to do with. I slipped the envelope inside between two notebooks. Not to hide it, not to save it, just to place it where it belonged in the past. I stood there for a moment, one hand resting on the drawer's edge. I didn't feel anger, I didn't feel grief. What I felt was stillness, a quiet truth settling into place. I didn't owe her a response. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. That letter was not a beginning. It was a release, hers, not mine, I whispered to the room, to the space around me, to the part of myself that had waited so long for this moment. I'm not angry, I'm free. Sometimes I imagine it my old chair at the family table. Still there, maybe still empty, still waiting for someone who finally stopped waiting. I wonder if they talk about me now. If my name slips into conversation like an accident. Not loud, not bitter. Just present an echo instead of a punchline. I used to be the family's easy scapegoat, the one too sensitive, too serious, too much. But echoes aren't so easy to dismiss. They linger. There's a kind of power in absence I never understood before. Not the power that shouts or slams doors, but the kind that creates silence in its wake. Not everyone notices what's missing right away, but eventually they do. Eventually someone sets the table and pauses. Eventually someone calls a name and hears it bounce back with no answer. But that part isn't mine to hold anymore. I didn't walk away to teach anyone a lesson. I didn't disappear to make a point. I left because I was done performing. Done shrinking. Done trying to earn a place in a story that never saw me as more than a footnote. Now I sit in a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a plant shop. No one here knows who I am, and no one expects me to be anyone else. I order my coffee, take a seat by the window, and watch the world drift past in slow, ordinary beauty. No ghosts follow me here. No expectations hover over my shoulder. I stir the foam with my spoon, breathe in the warmth and smile. Not for anyone watching, just for myself. I no longer miss who they were. I miss who I hoped they'd be. That's a softer ache, one that doesn't cut the same way. But I honor who I've become. And in the hush of this life, I've built one rooted in choice, in peace, in quiet dignity. I finally understand something that used to feel impossible. I never had to scream to be heard. Peace was the loudest thing they ever heard from me. And it still echoes.